Everyone know I've taken an extra beta blocker tonight. Beta blockers, for those of you who don't know, is the medication used to decrease the activity of the heart. So let's hope it keeps my heart calm. I've been instructed to wear my Apple Watch, so we'll be able to track. When Tanya asked me to speak, I initially felt like I didn't even know what I was going to give over. When I sat down and I applied my mind to it, I realized that I actually have so much to share. I had to select what to share for tonight specifically, and please God, there'll be other opportunities to share the rest. My relationship with the Rebbe started before I was born. It was May 1991, and my mom was in New York for my aunt Shimona's wedding. She stood in line to receive her dollar from the Rebbe, and she asked that the Rebbe give her and my father a bracha for children. The Rebbe gave my mom a dollar, and he said to her, "I'll give you a bracha for children." My Baba came next, and she asked for a bracha for her girls. The Rebbe pointed to my mom, and he said, "This is for your daughter," handing my Baba $2. My mom had twin babies, myself and my brother Yoni, in May 1992, exactly a year later. Tonight is about acknowledging the blessings of Hashem and the Rebbe, and the power of community and tefillah. When my cardiologist, Dr. Vashiat, who is a frum Muslim, walked in on the morning that I was extubated, for those of you who don't know, and it's not a term that I knew, extubated means when they remove your ventilator, he said, "I have no way of describing what has happened to you other than this is a miracle. Your community did something right with their prayers. You survived to be a light." The sister who was standing with him came into my room afterwards with tears in her eyes. She said, "I'm sorry that I'm so emotional, but I've never heard Dr. Vashiat speaking like that." Tonight, I hope to spread the light of revealed miracles with all of you. I want to set this out for you in chronological order in terms of how we saw the brachas unfold and how we saw the Rebbe's hand in the beginning, middle, and end, with 3 different Rebbe stories and multiple miracles within each. Let me take you back about 8 months ago to where my story began. I was 37 weeks pregnant, about to have my second baby, when I was diagnosed with breast cancer. Due to my diagnosis, 5 days later, I had to have an elective Caesar, and I gave birth to my beautiful baby, David Shalom. We celebrated his bris with our friends and our family, and 3 days after the bris, I made my way into the oncologist's room for my first dose of chemotherapy. I had a newborn and a tumor. It was the new reality that I needed to swallow. I needed to have Red Devil, the most toxic of the chemos, and I needed to have the dose-dense version, which meant every second week as opposed to the standard of every third. I don't want to go into too much detail tonight. The journey was as grueling as you'd imagine. I lost my hair and I lost my spark temporarily. But it had an end point, which was marked by my double mastectomy surgery, which would please God begin my return to normal life. My surgery was scheduled for the morning of the 12th of January. It was, as a lot of you sitting in this room know, the first day of school, and I was devastated to be missing yet another important event in my daughter Leia's life. It was important for me that Srali be at home with her and take her to school so that the morning could feel as normal as possible for her. The night before my surgery, as my friends here all know, I was feeling depleted, anxious, and sad. At 9 p.m., I received a WhatsApp from Oramashi Lipska, who is currently in New York for the Kenos HaShlochos, head shlocha to South Africa, a dear friend of our family, and my grade 1 Cheder teacher. Moramashi had been involved in my health journey since my diagnosis, always checking in and sending beautiful messages of encouragement. She knew that I was scheduled to have my surgery. Moramashi's message read as follows: "Dear Shira, we would like to give you $1 from the Rebbe. Where or when would be best to bring it?" What? $1 for me? I immediately felt a sense of relief and comfort wash over me. I couldn't believe the generosity of Rabbi Lipska and Moramashi. I know how precious each dollar is. Phew. The Rebbe will be with me in the surgery. Baruch Hashem. I arranged with her that Strolly would collect the dada on the way to the hospital the next day after dropping Leia off at school. My parents picked me up the next morning at 5:30 a.m. as we headed to the Donald Garden. I went there with Koshal Bracha that Shira Gutnick had dropped off for me, and I felt equipped. When Strolly received the dada on my behalf, I was lying on the operating table in theatre, my body marked with permanent marker, as the anaesthetist administered the anesthetic. Strolly was at Dada's. Hashem and the Rebbe were with me. Within seconds, the team realized that something was wrong. My blood pressure dropped, and the left ventricle of my heart failed immediately. My heart had stopped. Thank God, my anaesthetist was humble enough to urgently call for help. He knew this was beyond his scope. Miraculously, the lead ICU specialist, Dr. Liam Brannigan, happened to be in the tea room adjacent to the operating theatre. My breast surgeon, Dr. Sarah Neitz, relayed to my mum that had he been anywhere else in the hospital, it would have been too late. Not only was he right there, he is also a super specialist and knew immediately what this extremely rare condition was. As a result, he was able to direct the appropriate resuscitation. I later learned that this condition is called takotsubo. Just as a side point, after I woke up, I kept trying to remember the word takotsubo, and it was such a strange word, and I just couldn't remember it, and I just gave up, but now I've written it down. This was the first miracle, that he was there and equipped with the knowledge and resources that we needed. The team managed to resuscitate me and put me on life support. Just saying life support still gives me chills. I never imagined that, God forbid, I would need life support. At that point, the two surgeons involved, Sarah and my plastic surgeon, came to find my mum, and they told her with grave faces that my heart had failed on the table and I was in critical condition. They explained to her that I needed to be transferred to Mill Park, to which my mum requested reassurance that I would be okay. They were not able to guarantee a positive outcome. We just can't promise anything at this point, they said. My mum, who's here tonight, my guardian angel, had the presence of mind to immediately alert the Tehillim group with the following message. Shira's in heart failure, in critical condition. Please storm the heavens. Within 10 minutes of them reading the message, Leah Jamison, Deb Rothman, and Chaya Liberov arrived at the hospital to say Tehillim and were a constant presence for the next 11 days. Rabbi Shachat immediately got into his car and headed to the hospital, as did my close and beautiful friends and siblings. My soldiers were beginning to mobilize.
Sorry, 1 second.
The surgical team very quickly arranged a specialized ICU ambulance for the journey across to Mill Park. I've learned all these new things. Apparently, for a patient on life support, you need a special ambulance. The cardiothoracic ICU had been informed, and an ECMO machine, a machine that takes over the function of the heart and the lungs, which is only available at very few hospitals in Gauteng, was on standby, as my heart was barely functioning on its own. The journey to Mill Park was critical. Had the hospital been more than 5 minutes away, it would have been too far. This was miracle number 2, as the original plan was that I was potentially going to have my surgery in Morningside. I followed the advice of Professor Barry Jacobson, who insisted that I have the surgery at Donald Gordon, a hospital with an ICU, and in hindsight, one that is only 5 minutes from Mill Park. Within minutes of my arrival at Mill Park, I was rushed into theatre, and thank God, one of the best cardiothoracic surgeons in the country, Dr. Martin Sussman, was available to attend to me. My family and friends who had already arrived at the Mill Park at that point saw me being wheeled through, unconscious and unaware that my life was on the line. The ECMO machine was inserted, but my prognosis remained dire. Dr. Sussman came out to speak to Strali and my parents, who were considering giving me an additional name. We know this is something that we always do when it is a matter of life and death, but my sister-in-law, Yali Zagnov, who was Yali Zakstein's parents, Rama Diana and Danny Zakstein, straight away phoned my parents and said, we need to change her name. Before making the decision to add a name, my parents asked Dr. Sussman whether my condition warranted a name change. Dr. Sussman said, Mill Park sees very sick people, but your daughter is the sickest patient in the hospital right now. Rabbi Shochat, who heard what Dr. Sussman said and had been there from the beginning, Efrat, thanks for always holding down the fort at home, decided together with Strali and my parents that a name change was called for. Within a short time, 10 men, all of my friends' husbands, had arrived, and I was given the name Sarah. Just as a side point, a few weeks before this, I had said to Strali that I'd actually always wished that my name was Sarah, our matriarch and the princess of the Jewish people. So, just to give context, I had gone in for my original surgery at 8:30 a.m. It was now 12:30 p.m., 4 hours later, and I was on the ECMO, a ventilator, a feeding tube in my nose, and a cocktail of drugs pumping through my veins. I later learned that an ECMO machine is used as the last resort in trying to keep a patient alive, and that the survival rate is only 30%. Thus began a 12-day stay at the cardiothoracic ICU at the Mill Park Hospital. While this was happening, the power of global Jewry had kicked in. My mum became my gladiator. With bravery and wisdom, she began to send out updates, knowing how desperately we needed the doubling. Within a short period, the first WhatsApp to Helen group was full. 1,000 people had joined, and additional groups had to be started. I later found out that Mrs. Hannah Schaaf, mother of the Schaaf boys, whose videos were shown at the Jutschbad Verbringen, joined the WhatsApp group and would read my mum's updates at the Ohel to the Rebbe. I couldn't have known just how important the outpouring of tefillah would continue to be. When my parents entered my room early on Friday morning, the attending sister told them that we faced a new crisis. Overnight, the left catheter of the ECMO was compromising the flow of blood to my left leg. There was virtually no pulse. The doctors decided that in order to save my leg, they would have to move the catheter from my leg to the artery right below my shoulder. I was wheeled back into surgery, and the doctors tried to make the change. They were unable to insert the catheter below my shoulder, and they had no choice but to put it back into my leg. Their choice was life, with or without my leg. My mother asked for the group to focus their davening before Shabbos on the health of my leg. On Shabbos morning, the doctors had no explanation for the fact that my leg was perfect. There was no obstruction. I know. It was miracle number 3. And it was without a doubt the power of Shabbos, the davening, and specifically the davening of all of you, the women when lighting candles on Friday night and baking challah in my merit. Thank you. I remained in critical condition, but with each hour, my heart slowly grew stronger. In my unconscious state, flying on the wings of soaring Tehillim, Torah learning, and mitzvahs of thousands of Jews from all over the world, I clung to life. What I also know is that our community and my beloved friends displayed a level of loyalty and devotion that even the Joburg Jewish community, which is world-renowned for its tremendous chesed, was deeply moved by. I will never be able to express the depth of my gratitude to every one of you for the level of care shown to my family and I during this treacherous time. My close group of friends took over the running of my house while my family attended to me in hospital. Meals for home and meals for my family at the hospital. I'm blessed to be friends with really good cooks. Shopping, activities for Leia, baths for my baby. Nothing was too much. My siblings and my sisters-in-law became my children's surrogate parents. My mother-in-law flew in, as did my brother-in-law Fali and my sister-in-law Hannah. Jess Venoka flew in from New York and barged into my ICU room, where no one other than immediate family was allowed to tell me that I'd better wake up. It takes a village, and I'm extremely grateful for mine. The next big decision that the medical team had to make was whether to go ahead with the mastectomy or not. The argument against proceeding was whether my heart would withstand the stress of another procedure and whether there would be excessive bleeding as I was on strong blood thinners to prevent clotting from the ECMO machine. My mom literally watched as the blood of my body was being pumped in and out with the machine. The counter-argument was that if I didn't do the mastectomy at that point, I would have to have it soon thereafter and potentially be subject to complications again with another anesthetic, God forbid. The doctors were also worried about my reaction if I woke up and nothing had been done. Good. My family wrote to the OHL to ask that Hashem give the doctors the wisdom to make the right decision. Shortly thereafter, the team of doctors led by Dr. Susterman came in to inform us that their advice was to take me off the ECMO and to do the mastectomy. They suggested that my family take some time to think about the decision. Strali told me that that night was filled with anxiety. The magnitude of the decision was enormous. Strali, thank God, was able to make phone calls to some of the incredible doctors in our community, including Dr. Yossi Unterslak and Dr. Nafi Levine, to get clarity and comfort about making the right decision. We are so blessed to have these brilliant minds within our community, and to have, as a Rebbe advised, a Roth did. The decision was made to go ahead, but my breast surgeon was reluctant. She felt nervous to perform the procedure given my critical condition. Yossi called her and told her she needs to man up and get her scrubs on. I've always said that if anyone, God forbid, gets sick, make sure you're friends with Yossi Unterslak. The mastectomy was to take place on Wednesday morning. This was now nearly a week after my original surgery, and I was still completely unconscious and unaware that any of this had happened. Okay, Rebbe story number 2. Strali's grandmother, Mrs. Asya knew. Can we show the picture? Oh, here she is. Passed away in Melbourne on Tuesday night, the night before my second surgery. Just to mention, her father, Reb Issa Kluvgand, was a first cousin to Rebbe Tzimchana, the Rebbe's mother. Baba Asya's funeral took place on Wednesday afternoon in Australia, which was Wednesday morning in Johannesburg, just before my surgery began. In her last moment, my sister-in-law, Rivka Krinsky, told her how I desperately needed a refuah, and she squeezed Rivka's hand in acknowledgement. At the funeral, a special kapitel of Tehillim was said for me, and Zayda Mendel, her husband, said Boba is up there so that Shira can live down here. Right after the funeral had ended, Strali's niece and nephew, Eti and Zevi Krinsky, decided to go to the OHL for me in New York to Dublin for my surgery to be a success. When they walked out of the OHL, they saw this video of Strali's grandparents, Zayda Mendel and Boba Asya, playing. Let's watch it together.
Oh, sorry.
They couldn't believe what they were seeing. Zayda Mendel and Boba Asya asking the Rebbe for a bracha for their children moments after her funeral as I was lying in theatre. Initially, the family was skeptical. Was this video shown on purpose because someone knew that it was Boba Asya's funeral in Australia? My brother-in-law, Shmaya Krinsky, called Elkanah Shmatkin, the head of GEM, whose team compiled the videos for the OHL, and asked him whether this video was played intentionally. Elkanah called his team, and everyone said this video was not played purposely, it just happened to be on. There is no doubt in my mind that Boba Asya wasted no time on high and straight away saw to it that Hashem saved her granddaughter. Boba Asya actually shared a close relationship with Rebbetzin Chaim Mushka. She relayed the following. My first visit to the Rebbetzin was together with my father, who knew the Rebbetzin from Russia as they were relatives. She always received us warmly. After that, whenever I came to New York, I made it a point to visit her. The Rebbetzin always served afternoon tea on beautiful china dishes with cream puffs and angel cakes. She was very well groomed and elegant. At every visit, she inquired about the children, and she was very interested to know how they were all doing. How grateful I am to be connected to Boba Asya and to have had her intervene on my behalf. Thank God, the mastectomy was successful. In addition, they were able to ascertain that there had been no spread of the illness and that I thank God am in remission. Miracle number 4. Once the surgery was a success and my heart was growing stronger on its own, they slowly started to reduce the sedation. I woke up on Friday morning, the 20th of January, 8 days after my first anesthetic. When I woke up, I thought I was waking up on the 12th of January in the Donald Gordon. I woke up extremely agitated, which is the norm following 8 days of intense sedation. I woke to my mum and my sister Rifka. My mum was saying, "Shishi, you've been very sick, my darling. We had to sedate you." My first thought was, "Are you joking?" And then I quickly realized that I couldn't talk. I was still connected to the ventilator and the feeding tube, and my hands were tied down to the bed to prevent me from pulling out the vent, which I would have done. Please God, no one in this room should ever experience what it's like to be on a ventilator, and especially to be on one awake. It's as if your voice box has disappeared. You cannot make 1 ounce of a sound. With my hands tied, I had virtually no way of communicating. I was attached to wires and needles and tubes, and I could barely move. Again, I won't go into too much detail tonight. My parents and Rivka did not leave my bedside. Between constant trips back and forth to my bedside, Strolly held down the fort at home, and the 4 of them were my voice when I literally could not speak. Between them, over what felt like the longest hours of my life, someone was always next to me. I communicated by writing on a pad of paper with my hands tied. I wasn't going to go so long without being able to say something. And somehow they made sense of my writing. Rivka was the most efficient translator. Sisters just get sisters. And despite her trauma at seeing me in that state, she stayed by my side. Throughout the night they sat. They held my hand and they soothed me. My dad sang me the songs that he sang to us in our childhood, and my mum stroked my cold arms. CTICU have a policy that they will only extubate a patient when the doctors are around. I was ready for those tubes to come out on Shabbos afternoon, but they made me wait until Sunday morning. Every minute was torture. On Motzei Shabbos, fully coherent and unable to speak or move, I reflected. My mind was racing. I nearly died. I've been given a second chance. What matters in this world and what doesn't? Everything felt so clear in that moment. I mapped out my speech for my So'edas Hoda, and the next morning I went online to order my outfit. With my vent in. The relief and pain I felt when they took the vent out of my throat on Sunday morning is inexplicable. The doctors were all in disbelief as to how fast my heart and my body was healing. The nurses, actually, once I left ICU, I was sent to ward 10, which is a step-down ward. I tried to get sent home that day, but they wouldn't let me. And then at about 5 in the morning, I was up and by myself, so I came to visit my CTICU nurses, and I walked in and they all looked at me and they went, "Hi, Bo." 2 days after I was extubated, my heart was back to full health and I was cleared to go home. Miracle number 5. The third and the last story of the Rebbe's guidance through this journey is as follows. The day that I left the hospital, Beishvat, was my father-in-law's mother's yahrzeit, Baba Rosie Gutnick. Because it was her yahrzeit, someone sent a video that I'll show you to the family chat. In the video, Strolly's grandmother, Baba Rosie Gutnick, received $2 from the Rebbe for the birth of her twin grandsons, Strolly and Folly. This is the dollar. You can show the picture of the dollar. This is the dollar that I had with me in all the surgeries that I've had in the past 6 months, and that I had with me too that day at the Donald Gordon. So on the dollar is written the day of the video, when she received it, and a note that says from Baba Rosie and Yisrael, so that they didn't get the twins mixed up. In that video, there's a particularly relevant exchange that Strolly Zayda Chaim Gutnick, who was the chief rabbi of Australia, shared with the Rebbe. And let's just watch just that bit together. The incredible hashgacha practice of Bobarosi receiving the dollars for the twins, the dollar that I had throughout my journey, at the same time that Zayda Chaim asked the Rebbe to partner with him on behalf of his children and grandchildren's well-being is astounding. As I near the end of this talk, there are a few points I want to share. It makes full sense to me that it was our community, the Lubavitch community of South Africa, that drove the powerful campaign to keep me alive. It makes sense because we are all connected in our essence to the Rebbe and to his teachings. Perhaps the Rebbe's most revolutionary call was his determined insistence on the beauty of every Jew, and the duty of every Jew to express love and care to one another, irrespective of our level of observance, because we are each a chelek Elokai mimal mamash, an actual part of Hashem himself. It is this love of one another that we have internalized from the Rebbe that brought about the call to arms. It is no wonder then that all of you exerted such a mighty effort to implore and to demand of Hashem to return me to Strali, to my parents, and to my beloved children. We are a community blessed with the most special people. People like Mama Shira, Mrs. Kraken, who has been a constant source of wisdom. People like Deborah Leah Weinberg, who mobilized the children, the army of Hashem on my behalf. And people like Tamar Goodman, who consistently dropped off gifts and messages since my diagnosis, even though I wasn't one of her close friends at the time. On the Friday after I came home, my doorbell did not stop ringing. Flowers and baked goods and more flowers. My home overflowed with all of your love. The feeling that I felt most deeply, and the message that I want to share tonight, is to live a life with conscious intention. In his book, Celebrating Life, Rabbi Jonathan Sachs wrote, "Our time was supposed to be the age of leisure, yet many people work harder than ever. One parent at work has become in many places two. Too many people I know feel endlessly pressurized trying to juggle work and home, family and career, ambition and recreation. We run in order to stand still. Often, the harder we work, the harder we feel the need to work. We can find ourselves so busy making a living that we never seem to have the time to simply enjoy being alive. When do we stop to let our blessings catch up to us?" When I discussed the idea of living with intention with Rabbi Shafat, he explained to me that the most powerful way to achieve this is through davening. The word for davening in the Torah, as it appears for the first time in Bereshis, is stand. The pasuk says, "Vayashkem Abraham baboker al hamakom asher amad sham." And Abraham rose early in the morning to the place where he stood before Hashem. Davening is about standing still and being present. Davening is one of the only mitzvahs whose function is to be emotionally present. The performance of the mitzvah is actually about the kavanah, the intention. The words are just the verbalizing of that experience. Shemona Esrei is called the Amidah. It's about physically standing still, but equally being mentally and emotionally present with Hashem and not looking to the next step and activity. Before this ordeal, I was often preoccupied for most of my day. I was always concerned with what was next, the next task I had to complete, the next thing on my checklist, the next item I needed to buy. I had placed myself inside an interminable roller coaster of unfocused behavior. I believed that the next, and then the next achievement or acquisition would satisfy an unarticulated inner need. What the blessing of life, indeed my rebirth, brought is that our godly souls descend to this world not to acquire external success and validation, but to cleave to Hashem, whose love for us is perfect and infinite. There is nothing that we can buy, and nothing that status can afford us, that will bring us the joy in life that conscious and intentional living and service of Hashem will. I cannot explain the feeling I felt when I held my babies close the night after I came home, and I said Shema, saying the words, V'ahavta es Hashem Elokecha b'chol levavcha, v'chol nafshecha. I had a heart that worked to say Shema, and a heart that could teach my children what it meant. When we invest intentionally in our relationship with Hashem, our inner emptiness is filled, and joy blossoms. When we choose to set aside time to speak to Hashem, the act of self-nullification and communion consoles and inspires us. All that is left to say is, thank you, Hashem. Thank you, Rebbe. Thank you, Rebbetzin. And thank you to every single one of you.